The Metamorphosis is a 1915 novella in 3 chapters by the Czech author Franz Kafka. Kafka was born in Prague in 1883 to a wealthy Ashkenazi Jewish family. He read widely at university. Goethe and Dostoevsky were among his favourite authors, and in 1906 he gained a law degree. Afterwards, he went to work in an insurance firm. This review contains spoilers. He was exempted from conscription in World War I due to the importance of his job, but he did try unsuccessfully to join up. He was diagnosed with tuberculosis in 1917 and spent most of the rest of his life in sanitaria. He died in 1924 at the age of 40. His 2 brothers had already died in infancy, and his surviving 3 sisters were all killed in the Holocaust. He had a strained relationship with his father, which some critics have claimed might help make sense of the Metamorphosis. In any case, he's widely regarded as one of the 20th century's greatest writers. Most of his stories take place in an unsettling no-man's land where absurdity and alienation overlap, and for which the term Kafkaesque is nowadays commonly recognized as the best designation. The Metamorphosis is about a man called Gregor Samsa. Its first sentence usually reads, Gregor Samsa awoke in bed one morning from unsettling dreams to find himself transformed into a gigantic insect. Gigantic insect may require modification. I'll come to that in a moment. What follows is an account of his own reaction and that of others, particularly his family's. Obviously, they're horrified to begin with. Gregor is the family breadwinner, and without him they'll starve. His father's angry, his mother faints. His sister, Greta, looks after him for a while, but grows bored. Eventually, they all get jobs, lose interest in him, and turn his room into a store cupboard. Greta then comes to the conclusion that he's a burden and that the family needs to get rid of him. Overhearing them, and devoid of all hope, Gregor crawls back to his room and dies. His body is discovered by the cleaner, who disposes of it. The family, on finding out, treat themselves to a day in the countryside. So what does it mean? It's often given a psychological interpretation. It represents Kafka's own relationship with his father, or with his sisters, or with his family, or with the world in general, which may or may not be true, but unless its interest is purely biographical, it has to mean more. There are Marxist interpretations. It's an illustration of alienation. Gregor Samsa is working in a dehumanizing job, and he hates everything about it, particularly his boss. But then his enforced removal from estranged employment doesn't bring about any mitigation of his condition. Far more popular have been existentialist interpretations which see Gregor Samsa as possessed of an irrevocable insight into the human condition. Rather like Antoine Requentin, the central character in Jean-Paul Sartre's later Nausea, he's repulsed and driven into self-imposed isolation. He now knows too much, and what he knows is incommunicable. The problem is that Gregor Samsa doesn't seem to be particularly introspective, and his transformation doesn't seem to be the result of any kind of revelation. Maybe there's a clue in the title. Metamorphosis is a process, and it's the one thing we don't see in Kafka's story. Gregor Samsa just wakes up to discover it's happened. For that reason, some commentators have claimed that it's really about Greta's metamorphosis into a young woman. But I think it would be strange if the laws of physics had to be overturned just to underline that. The other big metamorphosis in literature is Ovid's epic poem written in the 1st century CE, which considers all kinds of transformations. Maybe we can get to the point of Kafka's story by means of contrast to that. So while Ovid's metamorphoses are all numinous, Kafka's is ominous. Ovid concentrates on the process, Kafka's purely about the result, and so on. Deduct enough Ovid, and things might become clearer. As I mentioned earlier, gigantic insect is probably a mistranslation of the story's opening sentence. Monstrous vermin is preferable. That might sound like a trivial point, but it isn't. Insect is a descriptive term, vermin an evaluative one. Kafka himself was adamant that Gregor Samsa's transformation should never be shown, even from a distance. In summary, this is one of those stories that gets more mysterious the longer you consider it. Perhaps the best solution was given by one of Kafka's recent biographers, Rainer Stack. He said, it's uninterpretable, it simply is. Yes, we know it makes us feel deeply uneasy, and we're convinced we ought to be able to say why, but we can't. See what you think.